Okay, hi everyone. Today we're going to have a look at Illustrator, setting up type in Illustrator and working towards exporting it as a SVG into Blender ready for some animation. So let's have a look at what Illustrator is like the first time you open it and the setup we need to do, and then we'll move forward from there having a look at some text basics. Now my voice is a bit rough today, so I'll keep drinking water as I go along, so excuse my sound of my voice. Right. Let's have a look here. So I've got Illustrator open, and when you open it for the first time, before you have a file open, if you go into your preferences and come down to units, I recommend that you change general to millimeters. You know, in Australia we like to work in metrics, so keep the general on as millimeters. I think that'll make life a bit easier for you. But the stroke, I like to work in points. It's pretty much industry standard, and type in points as well. So that should get us started. Let's just go OK. And first thing is we can create a new document. So when you go new, we can select the size. I'm just going to select an A4 here. Pretty straightforward. 297 by 210 is our standard size, and I'm going to select a landscape. So you can click on either of these. I'm going to click on landscape. Fits to our screen a bit better, and that should sort us out. This bleed here, you don't need to worry about this too much, but that's for if printers want to print out a document that's got colours that go outside the page. They can sort that out, and it has got an advanced checkbox down here where you can change CMYK or RGB. I just leave it in CMYK. It's pretty much the standard working mode in Illustrator, but it doesn't matter too much. Okay, so once you've got all that, you can go OK and make a new page. That's cool. And then you can start to work on it. But I'm going to go to this other page that I've set up, and I just wanted to have a little bit of a look at using type in Illustrator today. So the first thing that we're going to do is, let's just zoom in and have a little bit of a look here about, we've just got a few concepts to deal with, as far as using type goes. Okay, so first thing is that there are a few different types of typeface that we use, and the first one is the sans serif typeface. So I've got some set here, and you can see that the defining feature of these sans serif typefaces is where the letters come to an end. They've got a square finish. So we can see, say this I has got, it's just a straight square finish. Same on the R. They maintain a relatively consistent thickness throughout the letter form. So Helvetica is probably one of the best known examples of a sans serif font, and that's what I've got that set in there. Okay, so you're going to find that there's a few really nice sans serif fonts, and there's a lot of really horrible ones that are just extremely difficult to set and make them look any good. Myriad's one of those that's just extremely hard to work with. So I recommend, look, Helvetica or Helvetica New, that's a nice one to work with, and it'll respond to it'll let you work with it. Okay, so sans serif fonts tend to look fairly modern, easy to read, especially for things like headlines and street signs and things like that. They make a lot of sense. The next one we've got up is the serif font, so I'm just sort of highlighting that down here. We can see the big difference with the serif is that these ends on the letters are what we call serifs here, and the serifs can help to make a body of text more readable. So you'll find that a lot of novels and newspapers and things are set with a serif font. So it tends to be quite readable in large amounts of text, in paragraphs and things like that. So, but you can see that it also tends to be a fairly kind of old style looking font. So yeah, I mean, use it. You can use them well, but you need to think that they often reflect kind of an older feel and a traditional feel to the text. So you need to think about what sort of image they convey if you're using them. And again, you know, there's some good ones. Okay, so like I've got here some Garamond, or this is an Adobe Garamond, which it's a nice font, and you can work with it. A really horrible one, Times New Roman, is just like the worst serif font you could just about use. So I wouldn't recommend, using any of those kind of standard fonts. They tend to be not that flexible when we get into really setting type. Okay, so we've got the two main types. We've got the sans serif and the serif. And next up, we've got a script type font. So there's quite a few different script type fonts, and they just replicate handwriting. Useful for situations where you might be, creating a traditional look. Maybe it's like a certificate or something like that. They're often used for. So script fonts, they join up, generally emulating handwriting. And then we've got the specialist type fonts. And the specialty fonts, let's go out a little bit in here, and they tend to be ones that we use more as one-offs. So you can see I've got this kind of like Star Wars replicant type font at the moment. It's it's a bit weird here, so it's a bit janky where the I and the T join together. You can see the difference between the I and the T and the S and the P here. So the spacing between the letters is not that consistent. And you wouldn't want to set a whole book in that font, okay? But you might use it for a heading on the cover or something like that. So specialty fonts generally are fun to look at, fun to work with, but you don't want to set large amounts of text in them. You just want to use them in specialized areas. But let's have a look at those in a little bit more detail, just in a bit of time to come. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was this idea of kerning. Okay, now I've got the Wikipedia definition here, and process of adjusting the spacing between characters to achieve a visually pleasing result. Okay, kerning adjusts the space between individual letter forms, while tracking letter spacing adjusts spacing uniformly over a range of characters. Okay, so this is actually a way that designers work with fonts to make sure that they get something that looks really nice and refined and even. And it can make a really large difference. Okay, so I've got a basic bit of a font here set. Now we can see that it's a sans serif. No, flares on the ends or tapers on the ends. It's all pretty basic. So in Illustrator, you can see here I've got my type tool. I'm going to click on the type tool, and that allows me to just select like any normal word processor or editor between the letters, and I can do some editing. But what I can do is I can go under Windows and set in, I don't know if it's that logical, but it's under type in window, and let's bring up character. Okay, now other programs like Adobe InDesign will offer you this. Photoshop's got had a reasonable go at it now as well. But over here we can see that it's telling us some information about our character. So it's telling us we've got Helvetica New, set regular. It's telling us our point size, which is quite large. Okay, so when we're setting, there's a few basic rules of type. 9 point is a good basic size for body text, which is a block or a paragraph, and anything above that gets a bit chunky. So word processors that tend to start out with 12-point type, good way to get things looking a bit cleaner. Drag your type down to 9 point instead, and it'll look a lot better. Another good thing to do is look at the kerning between the letters. So let's do that now, and let's start to have a look at these letters. So the kerning is this space between each individual letter, and you can see that it's not always consistent. So we can see the distance between the T and the Y here, and the distance between the Y and the P. There's a little bit of difference, and then we can see it's quite gappy between the P and the B, and then there's, again, we've got different spaces. So that's fine if you've got a lot of body text. You can let the software decide on how it's going to be. But if we're going to set something critical like a logo or a name or something really big, then we want to work the type a little bit more and get a bit more uniformity into the way it looks. So under this character here, we've got a few different settings, okay? So the main ones that we're going to be having a look at here is, or pretty much this one, is this controls our kerning, or our distance between individual letters, okay? So as I start to drag this down, so I'm turning this into the negatives, what this does is it starts to move these letters together, okay? And as I go into the positive values, it'll move them further apart, okay? So there's some good stuff we can do with that. I'll just set it on 0. So I can select all my letters, and I might give it a value of -50. Whoops, sorry about that. I'll pop it in here. So this controls a whole lot. So I'll go -50. Okay. I'm just going to click it down through, just seeing how it looks. Okay, and you can see it's starting to really compress my type down here. And it's starting to, okay, so I've gone -50. That's a fair bit of space I've removed out of this. And it's looking like a lot nicer and a lot more compact. But I can see that it's shown me a few issues here. The T and the Y, that's getting a bit close, okay? So I move to this original kerning here. I'm going to just move that out a little bit so that I've got a little bit of even space between these. Now this is just a personal, judgment on how you like to work with type. And every designer has ways that they like to do this. But this is the way I like to work anyway. Okay, so I'm bringing them down, and I just toggle it down a little bit like this. It's starting to look good. And now I sort of like sit back and I'll just look at it, get a feel for it. This still looks a little bit gappy to me. So I'm going to just pop this in here like this. That looks about right to me, and I wouldn't mind to see that just spaced a little bit more. And to me, that is looking pretty okay. So that's a pretty tight set bit of kerning. Okay, and I might even take that in a little bit more. Okay, some people, it's up to you. I like to tend to kern things together really tight into blocks of that, like that. Other people, sometimes you'll like to set them really spacious. So I could grab all this now, and I could change this from -50 to 200, and it would give me sort of like this modern style, major space out as well. So we can, and I'll just option drag that so I can copy it. We can see with just adjusting the kerning and a bit of fine tuning, so I'll put a -50 back on this again, is you can see that I've got two quite different looking typesets, even though I've only used the one font, and seemingly quite a basic font. So what you find is that a lot of designers and specialized typesetters will have, maybe they'll use 6 or 7 fonts or 10 fonts, and that's about all they'll use every day. And then they'll just add in the odd specialist font just to, spice things up a little bit. So you tend to become a specialist at setting a few different ones, and you know that you can work with them and you can get them to look good consistently. So yeah, that's basically how designers work with the basic setting type every day. Okay, so there are our basics, but sometimes when we do need a specialist font, we know that the Mac OS or your Windows OS or whatever OS you're using will come with quite a few predetermined fonts, and that's cool. But because everybody's got them, then everybody is going to end up with using similar fonts. So you want to start building up a bit of a library of fonts that you like to use. So you might build up, you might have your few sans serifs and your serifs that you really like to use. So I really like to use the Garamond series in my serif fonts. I like to use the Helveticas in my sans serif fonts. Scripts I don't really care about. I just use whatever's looking cool. And then you build up your speciality fonts. So if you're going to build up speciality fonts, what I like to do is I go to any font site. Look, the font's pretty good. It doesn't tend to have a lot of advertising, or the files seem all pretty good, and it's got a good selection. Okay, so you'll see that you can choose by themes, authors. New. I'm just looking through new fonts at the moment. When you find a font that you like, okay, you just click on download, and it downloads the font. Now I'll just show you that I've got one saved to my desktop. Okay, and I'll just show you how to install it into your computer. So I'm just going to go hide Illustrator, and here we go. I've pre-downloaded it, and we can see that it's come down as a zip. So it's not ready to use on our computer yet. So I'm going to double click to open it. Okay, and it's opened a little folder. Let's have a look at the contents here. So I've got a little bit of a JPEG. Probably, I don't know what that is. Doesn't really matter too much. Let's have a look at it. Okay, so there we've got the logo of the person that's made the font. We've got a PNG, which we don't really need. We've got terms of use, end use, license agreement. So a lot of these are free to use, but they may be that they're free to use for non-commercial reasons, and you need to pay to use them commercially or whatever. So it's worth checking out those license agreements if you're thinking about using these fonts in a commercial sense. And then we've got the TTF. Okay, now there's a couple of different file types, but you'll probably see quite a few TTFs, True Type Font. It's a decent basic one to start out using. So in order to actually get that operating, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this software called Fontbook. Okay, so this is a Mac specific piece of software, and I'm just going to close the door in my office. Okay, that should be a bit quieter. And so Fontbook is the software that controls what fonts we have open at any stage. Now, if you're a font enthusiast and you like having thousands of fonts, which it's easy to get into, then sometimes you need to turn them on and off as you're using them, so they don't use up too much system memory. So Fontbook is good for that, but probably starting out, you can just drag them in and have them open, and it'll be fine. Okay, so once you've got Fontbook open like this and you want to add a new font, okay, so I'm just going to grab the font here, the TTF, and I'm just going to, you can see, drag it across. It's giving me the plus. I just let it go, and it's added the font now into my Fontbook. Here we go. So it's California Sun. You can see it's for personal use. Okay, so it's not for commercial use. And it gives us our letter forms, so we can see it probably doesn't have numbers. It's probably only got the basics, okay, and it's only a regular, so it doesn't have a bold or a condensed or that sort of thing. So these specialty fonts often don't have a lot of extras, and unlike something like Helvetica or something like that, which will have a lot of different variants. So it's up to you which ones that you use. Okay, so now that that's installed through Fontbook, I can go back to Illustrator and I can grab a piece of font here. So I've got let's grab my specialty down the bottom. Oops, I'll just click on it. I'm going to use my type here. Actually, I'll just delete that. I'll just set it as a new bit. And California. Okay, so when I've got a piece of type, I can drag it out by the corner if I just want to quickly scale it up and down. And you can see here I'm using my shift key, and when I hold down shift, then it scales it properly. Okay, now you can see that type that I've set is actually maintained that -50 kerning that I popped in it before, so it's actually looking pretty good. So it's kept a lot of those values, but you can see there R and N's annoying me, so I'm just going to push those apart just a fraction, just so it looks about right. That's cool. Okay, so what I want to do though is grab this and I'll select my text. Oops. sometimes if things aren't showing, Command H will hide or show highlighting. So Command H shows me my highlighting. I wasn't seeing it before because I turned highlighting off. So that can be a good trick. So I've got California there. Let's have a look under my font names, and I should be able to find it in here. I can actually just hit the key C, and it will take me to the C region. And here we go. California Sun, personal use. Okay, and I've got my font available there to use. You can see that doesn't really like this custom setting I've got, so I'll set that back at 0 so it spaces out a little bit more, and you can see now I've got my text up and working. Okay, so that's really our first thing that we want to do to work with text, is just get a feel for what the different types of fonts are, and setting them up and doing a little bit of custom work with setting those fonts. So a little bit of care. You can see even how I've set this here with California, that it actually looks a lot better. So the difference between this as a 0, it looks a little bit gappy. So that's what the font would normally look like. Doesn't look that great. But if I put a -50 on it, it suddenly starts to look a lot more concise, and it's just, yeah, it's a better looking set of the letters. So as you're walking around and you see type set, have a think about it. Is it does that type look like it's been thought about and done well, or has it just been slammed into a computer and no one's thought about the letting process and the kerning of it? So that's a good thing to keep an eye out for. Okay, so that's basically vid 1. So you might like to go and have a look at, if you haven't yet, at the font or something similar. Have a look at all the cool fonts. Try downloading some and uploading them into FontBook on your computer. Okay, so look, I think learning to set type this way is something that's going to be of benefit long term. So give it a bit of a go. And next lesson, we'll look at getting a little bit more specialised in handling our type.